She was 24 and tired of feeling invisible. Not poor enough for sympathy. Not successful enough for respect. Just there. Every family gathering felt the same. The cousins talked about promotions, new cars, weddings, luxury apartments. And Ava sat quietly at the corner of the table, pretending not to notice the looks. Especially from her Uncle Darren, still working at that grocery store. He asked that night with a smile too sharp to be kind. A few people laughed softly. Ava forced a smile. Yeah, that girl always had big dreams. Another relative whispered, guess dreams do not pay rent. More laughter. Her cheeks burned. She stared down at the cheap paper plate in her hands while the smell of roasted chicken and expensive perfume filled the room around her. Then Darren raised his glass. To success, he said loudly, some of us work for it. The room erupted, and Ava finally stood up, not angry, not dramatic, just exhausted. She walked out before anyone noticed the tears in her eyes. But what she did not know was the humiliation that night would lead her to something her entire family had ignored for decades. Something hidden, something waiting. And by the time they discovered the truth, everything they believed about her would change forever. Before we continue, if stories like this make you believe that life can still surprise people in the darkest moments, take a second to subscribe and tell us in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Now let us continue. Ava grew up in a small, fading town where almost every building carried the smell of old wood and rainwater. The kind of town where people still fix broken chairs instead of throwing them away. Her grandfather, Walter Hale, had been one of those people. He repaired watches. Not expensive luxury watches. Simple ones. Pocket watches. Kitchen clocks. Tiny cracked wristwatches people thought were useless. His workshop sat behind their old family house. It always smelled like machine oil, cedar wood, and coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. When Ava was little, she used to sit beside him on a squeaky stool, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Walter's hand shook slightly with age, but the moment he touched a broken watch, they became steady. Gentle, precise. People throw things away too quickly, he used to tell her. Things, memories, people. Ava never forgot that. Her grandmother, Eleanor, was quieter. She baked bread every Sunday morning. The entire house filled with the smell of butter and yeast before sunrise. Even now, years later, Ava still associated safety with that smell. Back then, the Hale family was not rich, but there was warmth. Then life changed slowly and cruelly. Walter's eyesight weakened. Customers stopped coming. Big chain stores replaced repair shops. Nobody wanted repaired watches anymore. They wanted new ones, cheaper ones, faster ones. Ava watched her grandfather's tiny workshop slowly become silent. Dust collected on tools that once never rested. And then, one winter morning, Walter died in his chair beside the workshop window, a tiny screwdriver still in his hand. After that, the family changed. Not suddenly, quietly, like a house cooling after a fire. Ava's father tried keeping the house, tried keeping everyone together. But grief makes people impatient, and money problems make them cruel. Arguments started happening over small things. Electric bills, property taxes, who deserved what. By the time Ava turned 16, family dinners had become negotiations instead of gatherings. Her Uncle Darren changed the most. He became obsessed with money, business deals, real estate, appearances. He hated anything old, anything sentimental. Your father wasted years protecting junk. He once snapped while pointing at Walter's old workshop. Memories do not pay bills. Ava never forgot that either. When her parents passed away, only 2 years apart, first her mother from illness, then her father from a heart attack, the remaining family scattered completely. The old house was sold, the workshop locked forever, and Ava ended up alone in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. At night, she listened to dryers rumbling to the floorboards while trying to sleep. She worked double shifts at a grocery store, sometimes triple. Most of her paycheck disappeared before she even touched it. Rent, utilities, food. The rest went to debt. Meanwhile, her relatives grew wealthier, at least publicly. Vacation photos, new kitchens, perfect smiles online. But every holiday they still invited Ava, not because they cared, because her presence reminded them how successful they felt. And still, a small part of Ava missed the family she once had, not the current version. The old one, the warm kitchen, the smell of bread, the ticking watches, her grandfather's voice. Sometimes late at night, she wondered if Walter had felt forgotten before he died. That thought hurt more than she admitted. After the humiliating dinner, Ava drove for nearly an hour without knowing where she was going. Rain slid slowly across the windshield. Streetlights blurred into gold streaks. Her chest still hurt from holding back tears. Eventually, she stopped outside an old roadside diner. The neon sign buzzed weakly in the dark. Inside, only 3 people sat eating silently. Ava ordered coffee. That was when she overheard 2 older men talking nearby. Place has been abandoned for years. Since old Walter died. Ava froze. Walter, the city is finally auctioning it cheap next month, one man continued. Nobody wants that collapsing repair shop. Repair shop. Her grandfather's workshop. A strange feeling moved through her chest. Not hope. Something else. Something unfinished. A week later, she stood outside the abandoned property. The building looked smaller than she remembered. The paint peeled in long curling strips. Windows clouded with dust. The wooden sign above the door barely hung in place. Hale Watch Repair. She bought it for almost nothing. Most people thought she was insane. Maybe she did too. The first night inside felt unbearable. Silence pressed against the walls. Dust floated through thin beams of afternoon light. The air smelled like rust-damp wood and forgotten years. Ava walked slowly through the workshop. Every step creaked. Old shelves still held tiny jars of screws and springs. Tools remained exactly where Walter left them, as if he might walk back in any minute. She touched the old workbench carefully, and suddenly remembered his hands guiding hers when she was little. You listen to broken things, he used to say. They tell you what happened. A chill moved through her. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the sky. Then she heard it. Tick, tick, tick. Ava froze. The sound came from somewhere deep inside the workshop. But every clock around her was dead. At first she convinced herself it was rainwater. Pipes, old with settling. But the ticking continued every night. Always faint. Always somewhere different. Tick, tick, tick. Ava began staying awake listening. The building felt strange after midnight. Not haunted, just watchful. One evening she noticed scratches along the floor beneath a heavy storage cabinet. Fresh scratches, as if something had been moved repeatedly years ago. But when she tried pushing the cabinet, it barely shifted. Another night, she found an old ledger hidden beneath loose papers. Most pages were ruined by moisture, except one, a list of names, dates, and tiny handwritten symbols beside certain entries. She did not understand them. Then came the smell. Not mold, not dust. Cedar, fresh cedar. Impossible. The scent seemed strongest near the back wall of the workshop. Ava pressed her hand against the wood panels. One section sounded hollow. Her pulse quickened, but before she could investigate further, the lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Only rain outside, and that faint ticking again. Closer this time. Very close. Ava grabbed her phone flashlight. The beam trembled across the walls, then stopped. Someone had carved tiny markings into the underside of the workbench, not random scratches, coordinates, and beneath them, one sentence. For the one who stays. Ava stared at the words for a long time. The next morning she visited the local library. An elderly librarian named Mrs. Bennett recognized Walter's name immediately. He used to come here every Thursday, she smiled softly. He always researched railway history. Railway history. That made no sense. Walter repaired watches. Mrs. Bennett disappeared briefly before returning with an old newspaper clipping. Ava unfolded it carefully. Her breath caught. The article mentioned a train robbery nearly 60 years earlier. Stolen valuables never recovered. One suspect had disappeared near their town. A watchmaker. Walter's old business partner. Ava's stomach tightened. Questions flooded her mind. Why had Walter hidden this? Why the coordinates? And why did it feel like someone had wanted her to find it specifically? That night, she returned to the workshop, carrying tools and a flashlight. Rain hammered the roof. The hollow wall waited in silence. She pried away the wooden panels slowly. Dust exploded into the air. Behind it, a narrow hidden space. Inside sat a small cedar box, and beside it, a rusted metal door built into the floor. Her hands shook. The ticking sound was louder now. Steady, patient, tick, tick, tick. The metal door was heavier than it looked. Ava struggled to pull it open. Rust groaned loudly. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. Stone steps descended beneath the workshop. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to leave, but something deeper pulled her forward. The basement smelled dry, ancient, unlike the damp workshop above. Her flashlight revealed shelves lining the walls, boxes, old tools, and dozens of watches, all ticking, every single one. The sound filled the underground room like breathing. At the center stood a wooden desk. A single envelope rested on top, her name written carefully across the front. AVA. Her knees weakened. She opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter from Walter. If you are reading this, then you stayed longer than the others ever could. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Walter explained everything. His old business partner had indeed been involved in the robbery decades earlier, but before dying the man confessed something shocking. The stolen valuables had been hidden temporarily inside repaired watch shipments. Walter discovered the truth accidentally. Terrified of what greed would do to the family, he secretly recovered the valuables and hid them away. Not for himself. For someone patient enough to value more than money. Someone kind. Someone willing to rebuild instead of destroy. Inside the cedar box, Ava found stacks of old gold coins, jewelry, and cash bonds carefully wrapped in cloth. Enough money to completely change her life. But it was not the treasure that broke her. It was the final item in the box. A tiny silver pocket watch, the one she used to hold as a child. Inside the cover was engraved, "To Ava, the one who listens." Ava finally cried. Not quiet tears, real ones. Years of loneliness pouring out in that underground room, surrounded by ticking watches. For the first time in years, she did not feel forgotten. Ava did not tell the family immediately. She did not quit her job the next day, and she did not suddenly become confident overnight. Real healing does not happen like that. Instead, she started slowly. She repaired the workshop first, one wall at a time, one floorboard at a time. The town noticed. An old neighbor offered free lumber scraps. Mrs. Bennett brought coffee every Thursday morning. A retired carpenter helped repair the roof after hearing whose granddaughter she was. And gradually, the workshop came alive again. Ava began repairing watches herself. At first, she was terrible. Tiny springs flew across the room. She ruined delicate parts, cursed constantly, but she kept going, because every mistake reminded her of Walter's patience. Months later, people started visiting, not because they needed watches repaired, because they missed places that felt human, places with stories. The restored workshop smelled like cedar and coffee again, just like before. One afternoon, Uncle Darren arrived unexpectedly. He stood silently near the doorway, staring at the renovated shop, the ticking watches, the customers, the warmth. "You really did all this?" he asked quietly. Ava nodded. For once, he had nothing sarcastic to say. Then his eyes landed on Walter's old photograph hanging behind the counter. Something changed in his expression. Regret, maybe. Or shame. "You know," he said softly, "he used to say you were the only one who actually listened to him." Ava looked at him calmly. Years earlier, that sentence would have meant everything. Now it simply felt sad, because the real treasure was not the gold. It was understanding what Walter had been trying to protect all along. Not wealth, legacy. People think hidden value always means money. Sometimes it does. But sometimes hidden value is patience, memory, love that survives quietly for decades. Walter understood something the rest of the family forgot. Broken things are not worthless. Neither are broken people. Sometimes the world overlooks gentle people because they move slowly, because they repair instead of destroy, because they listen instead of shout. But quiet people notice things others miss. That is why Ava found what nobody else could. Not because she was smarter, because she stayed. 1 year later, the workshop windows glowed warmly every evening. The town called it Hale and Granddaughter now. Children pressed their noses against the glass, watching tiny watch parts move beneath Ava's careful hands. And sometimes during heavy rainstorms, Ava still stayed late after closing. The workshop would grow quiet, soft ticking filling the darkness. And for a moment, she could almost hear her grandfather beside her again. Not gone, just present in every repaired thing, every second chance, every patient moment. The girl, humiliated in front of her whole family, no longer needed their approval, because she finally understood something priceless. Some people only recognize value after it disappears. But the rare ones protect it before it is gone. If this story touched you, subscribe for more emotional mystery stories like this. And in the comments, tell us about someone in your life who believed in you when nobody else did. Sometimes one person can change everything.